So we were blessed with a new Death Note chapter today, and just FYI if this is your first time hearing about it, about a month or two ago it was announced that Death Note would be receiving a one-shot manga chapter that would be coming out in Weekly Shonen Jump. Now, currently this does not mean that Death Note is coming back. It doesn't mean that for the upcoming weeks to months, etc., we're going to be having new Death Note content. The point though is that the writers and the writer and artist of the series came back to just make this one shot to kind of give more closure to the overall story of Death Note, but also to give a little bit more taste of what potentially could be happening since the series has ended a very long time ago. It's been like over a decade, hasn't it? Hasn't it really been almost a decade since Death Note came to a conclusion? It's kind of crazy to think about how long it's been. I remember when I was at my local Books A Million a very long time ago, and I remember I found Death Note, and I sat there in the bookstore, and I read basically majority of the entire series in one go, and I went back the next day and finished the rest up without actually even buying it, just read it there, and I really had a lot of fun reading the series. It was interesting, and you know, I'm just like amazed by the fact that we're finally getting something more to the story. There's always been questions I've had since the series came to its conclusion. I've always wondered about what is going on in the Shinigami world. You know, where does the people go after they die if they use the Death Note? There's a lot of questions I've had, and I think many have had since the conclusion of the anime and the manga. And even though you probably won't get all of your questions answered within this one shot, it does give a lot of, I guess, clarity some of the things that happen afterwards after, you know, what happened with Light at the end of the story. So, to not spoil anything though, if you have yet to read said one shot chapter, I'll link in the description. You can check it out for yourself. It's free to read, honestly. You don't have to buy or anything. It's free to read and legal at that. But anyways, moving on, assuming you have already read it by the time you're at this point in the video, I have to say that this was an interesting look at the aftermath that Kira, the original user of the Death Note, Light Yagami, did on the entire world. We know for a fact that Light, regardless if you thought he was evil, bad, or wherever place you want to place him in terms of how you depict his character, we know for a fact that he did end a lot of people. Many people died thanks to his actions, and because of that, there was definitely going to be everlasting impact even long after he was gone. Because once again, another line is nobody can be in the position of power forever. Nobody has immortality in real world, so one day you'll grow feeble, old, and die. And obviously, if Light didn't die at the end of the story, he was going to die to old age or something, and so the world was going to be changed no matter what. The question is, what would be the legacy of Kira? What would people remember him as, and what effect did he have on the world long after his death? If there is one thing that we learn from this chapter, is that very quickly after Light Yagami's death, Kira was stapled all in world history books. People learned about Kira and the effect he had on everyone and how many people he ended, the FBI, etc. We pretty much know now that many people study him as an interesting figure of history. It's kind of fascinating, honestly, but also you have it to where people within the history books, they depict him as this evil, monstrous being that's just a straight-up villain. And yes, Light is definitely not a good person by any means. I mean, if you read the story and watched the anime, you know why. I mean, when it first started, he had somewhat of a justified means. It's like, for instance, does the ends justify the means? That's pretty much kind of what Light was about in the first half of the story. He was someone that was more of kind of getting rid of the bad people, ending bad people, and trying to make the world a safer and better place. His overall objective may be distorted, but in reality, he definitely was having some form of impact, which is clear by the way this one-shot chapter talks about him. Crime rate went down. It was a very peaceful world. He ended a war, so it's very clear that Kira did have an impact, at least on society to some extent, to where it became more peaceful. So that is something. He did, in some way, accomplish his goal. Even if it won't last forever, Kira, or Light, was able to accomplish what he wanted. But as, the story progressed in the original, as you remember, he became a little bit unhinged. He started to get rid of people that weren't necessarily villains or evil, etc. He got rid of people that were just in his way, and he became more and more distorted as time went on. He became more of a guy that had a god complex than anything, and that's pretty much where it meant that he needed to go. It was the end of his reign as basically the ruler of the world. So, it's interesting to just see the effect that Light had, and to this day, within the, the story up to like 2019, 2020, within the Death Note universe, he is talked about. So, I enjoy that. I enjoy that little tidbit so much, the world building in that. That is something that really made me so happy while reading this. That's not even getting into the fact of what this chapter actually does. So besides that, we have it where Rook, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right, he is seeking someone else to pick up his Death Note. Now, this is typical with Rook. As you remember from the beginning of the story, he was someone that wanted to actually have fun. He wanted something entertaining, something interesting, which is why he decided to find Light Yagami, which led to the entire events of the story. It gave Rook, a lot of fun. He was entertained for a very long time, years even, and he's been looking for someone to maybe one day replace Light and give him as much fun as that. And so that's where the one-shot chapter begins. It starts off with him trying to find someone, wanting to seek someone also to be able to be fed apples, etc. And he does find someone, but it's not a person he necessarily expected, because when you look at the first story of Death Note, the original story, Light was overcame by great power. He was greedy, he felt like he was a god, and he was definitely a monster in some degree. And you see a new character that's introduced, the one that inherits the Death Note, that doesn't necessarily want to use it. Now, this person isn't like a person that doesn't believe in what's going on. They understand the ramifications of what the Death Note can do, how Kira did it now, but also what a Shinigami is, but he just didn't want to use it because he had no interest in really being someone like Light. He just wanted to be able to get by in society and be able to have a peaceful and happy life. And so, in regard to that, he comes up with a devious plan to use the Death Note to put it on auction and make some good money from it. And honestly, it's ingenious. It really kind of depicts Death Note in a different light, something how it would be handled in today's society, and if Light would be able to adapt and overcome it if he was in today's society in Death Note. So, to get right into that, pretty much ever since the aftermath of what Light did, and also in today's society, real life, cameras and all of that type of stuff is all over the place. There's really no way to truly be anonymous in this world anymore. That's a really true statement. I mean, regardless if you think you could, call anyone you want and nobody's listening in, we know for a fact that calls can be monitored without you knowing. We know that people can go to call records and figure out who you're calling. Companies hold these type of informations. You also know when you go online, your internet, search history and all that can be tracked. Nothing is necessarily anonymous anymore. You can't do anything without really, I guess, being noticed by someone. And so if Light was to operate in the same way he did in the past, it would not end out the same way. There would be a completely different outcome. Now, I'm not saying that Light wouldn't overcome these challenges. He clearly would. He was an intelligent individual that really bent the Death Note's rules into so many different directions nobody really ever expected it. So one of the big things I do enjoy, though, is just seeing, modern era and how the Death Note would be used in it. And so the new character figures out how to use it and how to not get, the Shinigami Ryuk noticed by those that would actually see him. So he has him travel underground where no cameras or anything can watch him, and talks about how far he can be away from the person he's possessing. It's a really fascinating, just story, honestly, just giving us world building to some of these elements that many wanted to know for a very long time, such as myself. And, seeing how he was using the media, putting messages where, Ryuk was holding words for them to read and all that, it was cool to see him using the media to build up this publicity, to be noticed and sell this Death Note. And obviously, as it became more and more common knowledge and became more and more aware that this was being sold and more people believed it, it was obviously going to reach into the national level. And the character obviously knew something like that would happen as more and more people started talking about it. So countries eventually started to bid against each other who would gain this powerful weapon that is, the Death Note. And obviously, at the end of the, the chapter, it came came down to either China or America getting it, and obviously in Japan's standpoint, the better one to probably get a hold of it would be America, since America is a close ally to Japan. So obviously the Americans win it, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, actually manages to get a hold of it. And it's fascinating to see the depiction of the United States President, Donald Trump, within the chapter. Now, it's interesting how it goes on a fine line to make fun of Trump, but also not to be just straight up rude. Now, I'm not going to get into politics. I'm not going to get into that. That is not my place. I'm not going to discuss it. But the point is, though, I find it fascinating how a new rule was added. It was stated that if he was to receive the death note, he would die instantly because of the transaction of buying and selling. And so, obviously, the one that sold it would also have the same fate when they received the money. So, the main character of this one-shot was fated to die regardless. But at the same time, though, you have it to where, you know, the one that receives the death note, they can back out and be like, nah, I don't want this, etc. So it's kind of cool, honestly. I do really like the new rules that were added and how it kind of became a little bit more modern, and just also seeing how Ryuk is still seeking to find someone that one day can inherit his death note and do something that truly entertains him for a very long time. So I do think that this was a good one-shot. It was a fascinating way to kind of relive Death Note once again with a new fresh story and all that. And honestly, I would be completely fine with, you know, misadventures of Ryuk finding different people to hold on to his death note. I think that would be a really good story, because I don't think, you know, going down the same path as maybe Light Yagami, repeating him, would necessarily make good storytelling. The only way I would want to see something like that again is if you have someone that has, you know, I guess, relationship to Light Yagami in some way, or, you know, somehow he's brought back in some case, because we don't really know necessarily when they go, when they use the Death Note. So there's a lot of questions up in the air, but I would like maybe a story focusing on Ryuk, you know, going around, giving his Death Note to different people, and seeing how they actually manipulate and handle it, and I would love that. So, another tidbit I would like to add on before I wrap up this video, though, is we get to see Nier, or the new L, you know, in this chapter. And Nier, holy crap, this man has let his hair really just grow out. Like, if you didn't really know about Nier or know that Nier, who he was, you would think that Nier was a girl, just how much hair he has. Like, holy crap. So just, yeah, interesting. It was a lot of interesting stuff, seeing returning characters and all that brought back into the story, seeing people talk about Kira, good stuff. But tell me your thoughts. How'd you feel about this one-shot? It was even trending on Twitter for a long time today. It was like really trending quite a bit, so I'm just happy to see that. I'm glad to see Death Note making waves after all of these years. Many are talking about it. But I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.